Imagine this. You wake up to breaking news. Drones are flying over the Persian Gulf. Oil facilities are burning. Shipping routes are under threat. American officials blame Iran. Iran immediately denies involvement. And then, a strange question begins spreading across the geopolitical world. What if the attacks were designed to sabotage peace talks? Not by Iran, not by the United States, but by forces that benefit from permanent conflict. Tonight, we dive deep into one of the most dangerous possibilities in global politics. Could the recent Gulf drone attacks actually be false flags meant to derail U.S.-Iran negotiations? Because if that's true, then the Middle East may be heading toward a crisis built not just on war, but on manipulation, deception, and geopolitical sabotage. This is the big why, and this is the story behind the Gulf drone mystery. The Persian Gulf is one of the most militarized regions on Earth. 1/3 of the world's seaborne oil passes through nearby waters. The Strait of Hormuz alone is arguably the most important energy choke point in the world. And right now, tensions are exploding again. Recent reports describe drone incursions, attacks on vessels, and threats against Gulf infrastructure. Gulf states, including the UAE and Kuwait, have reported intercepting drones, while shipping fears are once again shaking global markets. Oil traders are nervous. Insurance companies are nervous. Governments are nervous. Because everyone remembers what happened in 2019. Saudi oil facilities were hit. Global oil production briefly collapsed. Washington blamed Iran. Tehran denied responsibility. Now, years later, history feels like it's repeating itself. But this time there's a twist. The attacks are happening while diplomatic channels between Washington and Tehran are reportedly active again. That timing matters. Because when violence suddenly appears during negotiations, analysts immediately ask one question: who benefits from the collapse of diplomacy? Before we go further, let's define the term. A false flag operation is when an attack is carried out by one actor, but made to look like someone else did it. The purpose? Manipulation. You create outrage. You manufacture justification. You trigger retaliation. You shape public opinion. Historically, false flag accusations appear constantly during wars and geopolitical crises. Sometimes they are real. Sometimes they are propaganda. Sometimes the truth is never fully known. And in the Middle East, where proxy wars, covert operations, cyber attacks, and intelligence warfare dominate the battlefield, confusion itself becomes a weapon. Iran has already accused Israel of carrying out false flag attacks in the Gulf region. Meanwhile, Western analysts accuse Iran of using deniability through proxies and irregular forces. The result? A region where almost nobody fully trusts the official story anymore. This is where things get interesting, because peace is bad business for certain geopolitical players. Think about it carefully. If Washington and Tehran actually normalize relations, or even partially reduce tensions, the entire Middle East power structure changes. Oil markets stabilize, military spending pressure decreases, regional alliances shift, sanctions policies change, energy trade routes reopen, and perhaps most importantly, Iran becomes less isolated. That possibility terrifies some governments and strategic groups. Not everyone wants a U.S.-Iran agreement. Some fear Iran becoming economically stronger. Others fear losing influence in Washington. Some worry a deal would reduce pressure on Tehran's regional network, and defense industries worldwide profit enormously from instability. Conflict creates demand. Peace destroys urgency. That's why analysts often say diplomacy creates spoilers. Spoilers are actors who benefit from negotiations failing. And historically, peace talks often face sudden violent disruptions right before progress is made. Now let's talk about the timing. Reuters recently reported that Iran responded to a U.S. peace proposal involving Strait of Hormuz security and broader regional negotiations. At almost the same moment, reports emerged of fresh drone attacks and Gulf tensions. That coincidence immediately triggered speculation among analysts online. Was somebody trying to destroy momentum before diplomacy advanced further? Because history shows this pattern repeatedly. Whenever negotiations begin improving, a bombing happens. A ship gets attacked, a missile lands somewhere, a drone suddenly appears, and instantly the political atmosphere changes. Hardliners gain power, trust collapses, military escalation returns, the peace process dies. This doesn't automatically prove a false flag operation, but it absolutely raises questions, especially in a region dominated by covert intelligence operations. Most people imagine war as tanks and fighter jets, but modern Middle East conflict is increasingly invisible. Today's wars happen through cyber attacks, drone strikes, proxy militias, economic sabotage, assassinations, maritime disruption, information warfare. And the Persian Gulf has become the center of this shadow conflict. The scary part? Drones make attribution extremely difficult. A drone can be launched remotely, modified commercially, transferred through proxies, or deliberately disguised. That ambiguity creates the perfect environment for strategic deception. Even intelligence agencies sometimes struggle to identify responsibility with certainty, and uncertainty creates opportunity. If an attack can be blamed on Iran quickly enough, diplomacy may collapse before evidence is fully verified. That's why some analysts are warning against immediate assumptions. To understand the stakes, you need to understand Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a shipping lane, it's the artery of the global energy system. Around 20% of global oil trade moves through it. If conflict seriously disrupts Hormuz, oil prices explode, inflation surges, shipping costs skyrocket, global markets panic, and governments worldwide face economic pressure. Even small attacks create massive psychological impact. That's because energy markets run partly on fear. A single drone can trigger billions in market movement. This gives asymmetric power to relatively small actors. Iran understands this. The United States understands this. And every regional player understands this. That's why the Gulf is permanently tense. Nobody can afford a full-scale war. But everyone keeps pushing toward the edge anyway. Now comes the hardest question. Who benefits from escalating Gulf tensions? There are several possibilities. Some regional powers fear any U.S.-Iran rapprochement. If sanctions ease and Iran reconnects economically, the regional balance shifts dramatically. Not everyone inside Iran supports compromise either. Certain factions gain political legitimacy through confrontation with America. Diplomacy weakens revolutionary narratives. American politics also contains factions deeply opposed to negotiations with Tehran. For them, pressure and containment are preferable to compromise. War scares create enormous defense demand. Missile systems, drones, naval deployments, air defense contracts. Regional instability fuels military spending globally. Militias and proxy groups often thrive during chaos. Peace threatens their relevance. This is why proving responsibility matters enormously. Because in modern geopolitics, appearances can shape reality faster than facts. Another battlefield exists: the information battlefield. The first version of a story often becomes the dominant version, and governments understand this perfectly. Immediately after Gulf attacks, media narratives explode online. Iran attacked. No, it was Israel. No, it was a proxy. No, it was staged. Social media accelerates confusion. State media pushes competing narratives. And ordinary people struggle to know what's real. This information chaos creates strategic advantages. If enough uncertainty exists, governments can justify almost any response. And once military escalation begins, reversing it becomes incredibly difficult. This is not the first time mysterious Gulf attacks appeared during sensitive political moments. Over the years, there have been tanker explosions, oil facility strikes, drone incidents, naval confrontations, assassinations, cyber attacks. Almost every major event triggered competing narratives. Iran blamed Israel, Israel blamed Iran. America blamed Tehran. Tehran blamed covert sabotage. Sometimes evidence emerged later, sometimes it never did, and this uncertainty permanently damaged trust. That's the dangerous part. When nobody trusts anybody, every incident risks escalation. A single misunderstanding can spiral into war. Now let's talk money, because global markets react instantly to Gulf instability. Even rumors of Hormuz disruption can move oil prices sharply. Why? Because modern economies are still deeply dependent on energy flows. Higher oil prices mean higher transportation costs, higher food prices, higher inflation, slower economic growth. Countries like India, China, Japan, and European economies are especially sensitive to Gulf energy disruption. And after years of global inflation pressure, another oil shock could be devastating. This means geopolitical actors have enormous leverage through maritime disruption alone. You don't need full-scale war. You just need enough fear. Now we reach the core question. Is there proof these drone attacks are false flags? No, at least not publicly, and that distinction matters. There is a huge difference between suspicion, strategic possibility, and verified evidence. Right now, analysts warning about false flags are mainly pointing to suspicious timing, conflicting narratives, and geopolitical incentives. That's not proof. But it does explain why skepticism exists, especially in a region where covert operations are common. The reality is that Middle East conflicts increasingly involve layers of deniability. Governments may use proxies, proxies may act independently, rogue actors may exploit tensions, or adversaries may intentionally create confusion. This complexity makes certainty extremely difficult. One reason U.S.-Iran relations remain trapped in crisis is because trust barely exists anymore. Both sides believe the other side is acting in bad faith. Both sides believe sabotage is happening constantly. Both sides suspect hidden agendas. That atmosphere destroys negotiations. Even when talks begin progressing, one violent incident can reset everything instantly. And once public anger rises, politicians become trapped. Nobody wants to appear weak. Nobody wants to trust the enemy. So, escalation becomes politically easier than compromise. That cycle has repeated for decades, but this crisis is about more than Iran and America. This is also about China, Russia, energy dominance, global trade routes, the future of the dollar system. China imports enormous Gulf energy supplies. Russia benefits from higher oil prices. Europe fears energy shocks. India worries about inflation. Every major power is watching Hormuz carefully, because what happens there affects the entire global economy. That's why even limited drone attacks create worldwide concern. The Gulf is no longer just a regional issue. It's a global pressure point. The scariest possibility is not necessarily deliberate war. It's accidental escalation. Imagine this scenario. A drone attack happens. One side blames the other immediately. Retaliation begins before investigations finish. Markets panic. Military forces mobilize. And suddenly diplomacy disappears completely. History shows many wars started through miscalculation, not grand strategy. And today's faster information cycle makes that risk even worse. Governments now face pressure to respond instantly. Social media amplifies outrage before facts are verified. That creates extremely dangerous decision-making conditions. Some viewers may ask, why should I care about drone attacks in the Gulf? Because your economy cares, your fuel prices care, your inflation rate cares, your stock market cares. The Persian Gulf affects everyday life globally. If tensions explode, gasoline prices rise, shipping slows, inflation worsens, and global uncertainty increases. That's why the world watches Hormuz so carefully. It's not just about geopolitics, it's about the stability of the modern economic system itself. So, could the Gulf drone attacks be false flags designed to derail U.S.-Iran negotiations? Possibly. But right now, there's no definitive public proof. What we do know is this: the timing is suspicious. The geopolitical incentives are enormous. The region is filled with covert warfare, and many powerful actors benefit from diplomacy failing. At the same time, accusations without evidence can themselves become propaganda tools, which means the truth may remain buried beneath competing narratives. But one fact is undeniable. The Persian Gulf has become one of the most dangerous geopolitical flashpoints on Earth, a place where drones, oil, misinformation, and global power politics collide. and where a single mysterious attack could change the future of the world economy overnight. If you enjoyed this deep geopolitical breakdown, subscribe to The Big Why for more videos on geopolitics, markets, war, energy, and the hidden forces shaping our world. And remember, in modern geopolitics, the first casualty is rarely peace, it's clarity.